Hello, I'm Langston, and I'm back on my channel, Military Election Forecasting. I know I've been gone for a while. My last video uploaded was about analyzing the 2023 elections. Today, I'm going to be making my third edition of the 2024 presidential election video. So I have some changes from my last election prediction, and I'm going to be talking about that and diving into that as well. So just give me a second. I'm going to fill out the safe states for both parties. And I do have some changes. Like last time, I categorized Montana as well as Mississippi as likely. And I take that back. I think that Donald Trump will win those states by more than 15%. I could see it. The reason why I categorize that is because I think that Joe Biden will struggle somewhat with younger turnout, and that will bring that state below 15%, as well as I could see you know, him struggling with black turnout as well in Mississippi, and that will allow Mississippi to be more than 15% for the GOP. So now I'm going to be diving into the likely states for Donald Trump. Most of these states, didn't really too much change from the last election. I could see, some other ones falling under 15%. We're talking about New Jersey, Delaware, Connecticut, or Rhode Island, as well as Illinois for Democrats as well. And we could also obviously see Mississippi or Montana or Kansas, or Missouri and Indiana fall under 15% for the GOP. So for now, I'm going to be categorizing the likely states for Donald Trump. Those states are Kansas, Alaska, Iowa, Nebraska's first district, as well as Ohio, Maine second, Florida, and South Carolina. So I'm going to be diving into that as well. So when looking at it, I would say that Alaska, obviously, I don't see Alaska really changing. Like Alaska didn't really even trend that much to the right in 2016. I think the main reason is Alaska is trending left is because of moderate voters. I don't expect for Joe Biden to do too bad with moderate voters and Native American voters. I think that he might struggle with some younger voters in the military in Alaska, like, some more progressive younger voters like service members. I think he might struggle with them, but, I don't think that that'll make too huge of a difference. But in my opinion, I still expect Alaska to narrow probably to be in like a 8-point victory for Donald Trump. In Kansas, very similar. Kansas and Nebraska's first district, they're primarily trending left because of upper class suburban voters. And, yeah, there might be some, I think, some demographic changes, like, they might be becoming more diverse as well. But, that's not dramatically going to change too much going into 2024. Like, these voters are still going to continue trending left the same way that they did in 2016 with Hillary Clinton, who was a very bad candidate. So, realistically, I do expect for Democrats to hold up their ground there at least in Kansas and Nebraska's first. I think they'll narrow Kansas down to being like 11 and 12 points. They'll narrow Nebraska's first to being, similar, maybe a little bit less. And also Nebraska's first is, has been drawn to be more Democratic. So that will also help Democrats in the district as well. In Iowa and Ohio, in Iowa, I could see Joe Biden losing a lot of ground. I think that Donald Trump will really do well with working class and rural voters. And I think that Joe Biden will struggle with turning out some younger voters, especially college voters. The few voters that are trending in Democrats' favor in Iowa. I do think Biden will keep making ground in the city of Des Moines, like the Des Moines area, like Des Moines suburbs and et cetera. But by and large, across the rest of the state, Trump will continue making gains. In Ohio, this is a state where I could see Biden absolutely collapsing in. And the main reason why is you go back to 2020, Trump really ran it up in these rural areas. And, the few votes Joe Biden got came from being able to improve dramatically in the suburbs, as well as doing really well with black turnout as well. In some of these cities, like, well, not really well, but doing pretty decent. So, with really bad black turnout, black turnout does go down like people are expecting. Um, you know, like I said, Democrats are fearing, there's a lot of articles about this as well as young voters. Democrats are really fearing losing ground with black voters as well as young voters. And I want to, kind of get involved on that. I definitely think that, hey, I think there is a really good chance that, these voters don't turn out. I don't think that, black voters will ever vote for a Republican candidate. This is coming from someone who is black, who grew up around my own community. Black voters, they tie voting Democrat is part of their own identity. Like I don't realistically see them turning against the GOP as well as I'm turning against the Democratic Party as well as younger voters. I think they might not vote, which will really hurt Joe Biden, but actually voting for Donald Trump is crazy. So I realistically don't agree with that, but I definitely see turnout issues, going forward. So with that, I think that that is a problem Republican Democrats can have. They've had a lot of victories in Ohio as of recently, but I think that local victories, like I think people don't really want to differentiate. There's a difference between the Democratic Party and Joe Biden. Like there's a difference between the Republican Party and Donald Trump. They're not viewed the same. So obviously, a lot of the local issues Democrats have been thriving in Ohio, but in federal races, we continue to see the same shit. Like we saw this in last year with Tim Ryan as well. So realistically, I do see that. I could see Joe Biden, being able to do pretty decent with black turnout and keep up the suburban trends. And, I could see him actually trending Ohio a little bit to the left if he does that. But as of now, I could see him absolutely collapsing with black turnout and, probably losing the state with Trump being able to make gains in rural and working class areas, losing the state by more than double digits. In Maine second district, I think Trump will continue making gains with the working class and with rural voters, and that will realistically help him a lot. In South Carolina, I think Joe Biden will struggle with black turnout. I don't think he'll struggle enough to lose by more than 15 though. And I think that Trump will do really well with rural voters, or rural white voters in particular, and that will really help him in the state. In Florida, I'm really interested in Florida because I could see Florida, still being lean, but in my opinion, I think Trump will continue to make gains with more so Cuban voters, voters and Hispanic voters in Florida. I don't think he'll make it gains with Hispanic voters nationwide, but particularly in Florida with Cuban voters, Venezuelan voters, and etc. I do think that he will continue making gains. And I do think that Trump will obviously bring out a lot of white voters in the Panhandle region, and that will allow him to win pretty substantially across the state. So now I'm going to move on to the likely states for Joe Biden. And Joe Biden does have a good amount. He has New Mexico, Minnesota, Nebraska second district, New Hampshire, Virginia, as well as Maine. I think that in New Mexico, Joe Biden he would probably improve with Hispanic voters just because Hispanic voters have a history of turning to incumbents. We've seen I'm seeing people say, oh, Joe Biden's going to do bad with Hispanic voters. I don't really agree with it. People had that worry about Donald Trump. 2020 did not happen. We saw from 2000 to 2004, Hispanic voters still trended to George W. Bush, despite 9/11, despite the Iraq War, despite, a lot of controversial decisions Bush made, Hispanic voters still trended towards him. From 2004 to 2008, from 2008 to 2012, we saw Hispanic voters trend to Obama, despite, 2008 being a blue wave year and 2012 being a more neutral year, despite, the economy not being in good shape, despite, the whole country trending right, Hispanic voters still did the opposite, except for, I want to say, black voters, maybe, and trended to Democrats. In 2006 2020, despite Trump losing, despite the COVID-19 pandemic, despite the Black Lives Matter movement, Hispanic voters still trended to Donald Trump. So, we've seen weak candidates like Steve Sisolak, Terry McAuliffe still do better with Hispanic voters their second time, as well as Phil Murphy, even though they might have did worse with every demographic, just because Hispanic voters, have a history of breaking to incumbents, at least by and large. And I think that is something that could realistically help Joe Biden going into 2024. I definitely think he could struggle with some younger voters, younger Hispanic voters, because of, some of his recent decisions, in particular, Palestine and etc. But realistically, overall, with middle age, older Hispanic voters, I do think they'll probably trend to him just because if the clock's not broke, why fix it? And I want to move on to Minnesota as well. I think that Minnesota, I'm curious as well. I think Biden will do well in the Minneapolis suburbs. I could see Biden kind of struggling a little bit in Minneapolis and St. Paul. These are a lot of very liberal voters, or very pro-Palestine young voters. Obviously, they're not too in favor of Joe Biden's recent decisions with supporting Israel. So I think that that's something that could hurt him if he struggles with turnout here. It would go down. I think enough of them would still turn out for him to be able to easily win Minnesota. But you get what I'm saying. In Nebraska second district, this is another district where I don't think Joe Biden will have any problems with. It's a moderate, left trending suburban district. Joe Biden's going to continue to do well with moderate voters. That's not realistically going to change. Joe Biden's problem is, he's struggling with black voters. He's struggling with younger voters. He's struggling with his base. Donald Trump is unpopular because Americans just hate him. Like, it has nothing to do with Trump's base. It has to do with, other voters hating him. Biden is hated because his own demographics don't support him. So it's a complete difference. So with that, I definitely expect Joe Biden to improve, probably win Nebraska second by double digits. In New Hampshire and Maine, very similar. I can see Biden struggling a little bit with younger voters because of his recent decisions. But overall, I think that, with the moderate, college educated white voters he'll continue to improve with. Most college educated white voters are in favor of supporting Israel. And, that's something that's really been hurting Joe Biden with younger voters. I don't think that will really hurt him, at least in these areas. So now we're going to move on to the lean states. So I'm going to move on to the lean states for Joe Biden. And for Joe Biden, he has three lean states, in my opinion. Those are Michigan, Nevada, and Arizona. And this is what gives Joe Biden a substantial advantage because Joe Biden has 258 electoral votes. In my opinion, I don't think Joe Biden will go lower than this, regardless of a disaster. I think Joe Biden will at least hold on to these three states. And that is what gives him, somewhat an advantage over Donald Trump. So in Nevada, I do expect for Joe Biden to do pretty well with Hispanic voters in Las Vegas. I talked about this, these voters have a history of turning to incumbents. We saw Democrats nearly able to win and, last time, despite, the whole country trending left, just because of the fact that we saw that, Democrats were able to nearly hold on despite horrible turnout in Las Vegas. So with that, with better turnout in Las Vegas and Reno continue to trend to the left, I realistically don't see Trump having too much of a chance, despite being able to improve with rural voters. I don't see him being able to have too much hope at winning in Nevada. Not even talking about the fact that Nevada is one of the most rapidly diversifying states in the country. Something that Republicans oftentimes don't understand is the fact that even though they might be improving with some demographic groups like younger voters, et cetera, like Hispanic voters, like Asian American voters, it doesn't really matter because there's more of them. For example, like let's say that you do better with them. If there's more of them in the electorate, it's still going to benefit the party that they vote for, which is Democrats. Like for example, let's say that 200 of them vote, but Democrats only win 60%. You know what I'm saying? So if they are winning 60%, if they're winning 140 out of 200, you know what I'm saying? If they're winning 120 out of 200, they're still netting what? They're still, netting 40 votes. If they win 70% and only 100 vote, you know what I'm saying? They're still netting the same, if not more. So again, it doesn't matter if you're improving, if more than turnout is still going to benefit you. In Arizona, I think that you'll see a very similar thing. For example, I think in Arizona's instance, we are seeing, we're seeing Democrats continue to make gains with moderate voters, moderate suburban voters. I think that, Hispanic voters will also trend in their favor. The only way I can see Joe Biden realistically losing in Arizona is if turnout crashes is in the city of Tucson. I don't think people talk about that. Like, Democrats, Maricopa County is what's trending the state to the left, but their base is actually in Tucson. Biden almost netted 100,000 votes there. So if Trump can, if there's bad turnout in Tucson and the margin in Pima County decreases because of that, then, we're talking about a potential for Trump to have somewhat of a chance at winning. But, I don't realistically see too much changing, at least in Maricopa County. I think that, you could see bad turnout in Phoenix, so that could hurt Joe Biden. But for Trump to win, he'd need really bad turnout in Phoenix and Tucson to be have realistically any chance. And I realistically don't see, turnout being bad enough for him to do that. We saw Katie Hobbs Katie Hobbs was able to win this race in Arizona. And, that really says a lot because, Katie Hobbs is a very weak candidate. Katie Hobbs is a weaker candidate than Joe Biden, and she won by more than twice the margin of Joe Biden. I don't think we really talk about that, but Katie Hobbs actually outperformed Joe Biden across the state. So because of that, I realistically don't see Trump having too much chance at winning in Arizona, at least. And the last state I want to give Joe Biden as a lean margin is Michigan. I think that in Michigan, like as of now, Trump just does not really have the numbers. I think Trump would do really well with the working class and with rural voters across the state. But I think that Joe Biden will continue making gains in Grand Rapids as well as Oakland County, and that will help. I do think Joe Biden will struggle with black turnout in Detroit. I could see him struggling with youth turnout in Washtenaw County and Ann Arbor, and that could realistically hurt him as well as black turnout in Flint. But again, like I think that he'll do enough to not, dramatically fall the same way Hillary Clinton was. And even if he does fall like Hillary Clinton, he will still net a lot more votes in Oakland County and Kent County than she did, and that will hold him up in the state. So realistically, I think that he'll win Michigan by more than 1% regardless. In my opinion, I think he'll win Michigan by probably 2 to 3 points. So yeah, that's Michigan. So the last couple of states I have, I'm going to be giving Trump lean states. I only have one lean state for Donald Trump, and that is Texas. I think that Donald Trump will win Texas by more than 1%. I think that Joe Biden will continue to make gains and, across the state. I expected Trump to only win Texas by like 1 to 3 points, 1 to 2 points. Now I can see it being 3 to 4 because I think that Biden will struggle with turnout in Austin. Like, I think he'll struggle with turnout in some of these cities just because of, his rhetoric towards Israel and et cetera. A lot of these, that voters in Austin, et cetera, are very pro-Palestine, and they don't want to vote for Joe Biden because, they feel like he's not taking up that cause. But I think that Joe Biden will improve Hispanic voters. He'll do better in the Rio Grande Valley than he did last time. Not substantially better, but he will do better. I think that he'll flip Collin in Denton County. He'll do pretty decent in Tarrant. I could see him not doing that much better in Tarrant just because he might not do that well with people of color, minority voters in Fort Worth. I think that he'll do pretty decent in Dallas, do pretty decent in Houston. He might struggle with turnout in Houston, Dallas, and San Antonio. I don't think he'll get the turnout there as well as El Paso, but he will be able to, outrun his 2020 numbers across the state. Trump will bring out a lot of rural white voters across the state, and that will hold him up as well. Now moving on to the really competitive states. So for Donald Trump, I have three tilt states for him, and I have two flips for him. So in my opinion, I think Donald Trump will win North Carolina by a tilt margin, as well as Georgia and Wisconsin. Georgia and Wisconsin are flips from 2020. I think that, I even categorized them as both being lean Democrat in my last election, but I'm going to dive into that. So starting off with North Carolina, because this one is not that much of a surprise, Trump was able to nearly win North Carolina by a lean margin. He barely won it by more than 1%. And, I realistically think, obviously Biden will struggle with black turnout in North Carolina, which is the base of the Democratic Party support. But realistically, Democrats are already struggling with black turnout. They really are. So I don't realistically think Joe Biden has too much to lose because Democrats didn't even do well with black turnout in 2020. So again, like I don't realistically see too much of a fall just because Democrats are already doing bad with black turnout. Like they don't realistically have anywhere to fall. So because of that, like I don't realistically see North Carolina changing that much. I don't see North Carolina becoming redder just because Republicans are already maxing it out. I think Trump will do really well with the rural working class areas across North Carolina. I think he will struggle in some of the upper class suburbs. And, Joe Biden won't be able to turn out enough black voters to win. But I don't realistically see black turnout, too big of a change for at least with black turnout to stop North Carolina from turning left. Democrats are already not hitting their potential in North Carolina. I don't realistically see them having any place to really fall across the state. And that's a problem for Republicans in the future. So similar thing in Georgia. In Georgia, I do expect for Trump to nearly flip back in Georgia. I'm actually from Georgia. And the reason why is, like I said, because of black turnout. And, North Carolina and Georgia are different. And the reason why is, the white voters in North Carolina are more Democratic. They're more liberal. They're not in Georgia. White voters in Georgia are extremely Republican. I don't think people really talk about that. But Trump won like 70% of white voters in Georgia. Even Herschel Walker won over 70% of them. And, even with all of his scandals, they still voted for him. Like white voters are going to vote for a Republican in the South, regardless of the circumstances. So because of that, regardless of all of Trump's indictments, that's not going to matter, at least when it comes to white voters. The problem for Joe Biden will be black voters, and I realistically don't see them turning out for him, at least in the margins that he needs. I think that in Georgia and North Carolina, what is benefiting Joe Biden is reverse migration. You've had a lot of black people move to Georgia that did not exist in Georgia in 2020. Those might replace the ones that won't turn out as of now. But you got to realize a lot of the ones that are moving there aren't going to vote for him either because they don't like him in their home state. So why would they go to another state and vote for him? So again, yeah, I think that reverse migration will help Joe Biden, but I realistically don't see it, being able to save Joe Biden across the state. I think that Joe Biden will continue to improve in Cherokee, Forsyth, and Hall County. He actually outran Raphael Warnock here. These counties actually, these were some of the few places Herschel Walker even did better than Joe Biden, and Herschel Walker even did better than, no, Herschel Walker did a little bit better than Donald Trump here. These counties, I think that, you know, Joe Biden would do a little bit better here. Trump is still gonna net a lot of votes here, so it won't really matter. Gwinnett and Cobb, I can see Joe Biden doing a little bit better there. Not really dramatic enough to make a difference, but realistically, where Joe Biden nets votes, where he wins a lot of votes, it's from Fulton County, DeKalb, and Clayton. And realistically, I don't see, I'm from DeKalb County, and a lot of people I know are not going to vote for Joe Biden. Black people vote primarily completely off of racial issues, and they think that Joe Biden has failed them, at least when it comes to black issues in particular. So unless things change from their community's perspective, they're not going to vote for him, and because of that, that will probably cost him to lose a state. He has to turn out like 1.5 million black voters to win in Georgia. 1.5 million, I think. So with that, I don't see that many turning out for him. I think it will still be close just because of Georgia's racially changing demographics. I think Joe Biden will improve in Henry County and Fayette, like in some of these southern Atlanta suburbs. But you saw Stacey Abrams do that as well, and she still lost. I think he'll do pretty decent in Savannah. In the Black Belt, I think that he will really struggle. Joe Biden and Donald Trump will do really well with the rural and working class areas. And that's something that will really help him. I don't think people talk about it enough. I talk about it. But Donald Trump is a really strong candidate for Georgia. His problem is the state is just becoming rapidly too black. And that's Donald Trump's problem. But for the white areas, for the Republican areas in Georgia, Donald Trump is a very strong candidate. He just cannot overcome, you know, high black turnout. And with low black turnout, I don't realistically think Trump has too much to worry about, despite all of his scandals, despite being convicted in the state, despite, being on trial in the state as well by election time. In Wisconsin, very similar. I think that, Trump will continue to make gains with rural and working class voters, and that will really help him. And, I think that with him being able to do that, I think that, yes, Biden, he'll do a little bit better in Waukesha, do a little bit better in Ozaukee County, but he won't do well enough. Like, you have to realize Trump is still winning these counties. And, there's not that many votes here. Like, for example, Trump only won Waukesha by 50,000. Let's say that 50,000 goes down to 55,000. Let's say that 55,000 goes down to 50,000 or 48,000. That's not going to make up for, the gains that Trump's going to make in these rural areas, especially considering the fact that Biden is going to struggle with black turnout in Milwaukee. We know this. Like, Biden is struggling with black voters. Black turnout in Milwaukee probably will go down, as well as potentially, we might actually see for the first time Democrats struggle with turnout in Dane County, because these voters in Madison, they're very pro-Palestine, they're very anti. Israel, and because of that, I realistically could see even them not turning out for Joe Biden. So with bad black turnout in Milwaukee and potentially bad turnout in Madison as well, I could realistically see Joe Biden going down. I think he will do better in the suburbs. I think it'll be really close. But as we've seen, last time black turnout was bad in Milwaukee, which was 2022, Mandela Barnes lost. But the time before that, in 2016, Hillary Clinton lost. So, like, we have multiple examples of this common phenomenon. If Democrats can't turn out their base in Milwaukee and be able to as well get out voters in Madison, they realistically don't have too much of a chance at winning in Wisconsin, in my opinion. And as of now, I think Trump will be able to do enough to win very, very narrowly. I think it'd be like a 0.2, 0.3% margin for him. But, win is a win. The last state for, that we haven't categorized is Pennsylvania. And this is why I think Joe Biden is still a favorite to win. I think Joe Biden will win Pennsylvania by tilt or lean. I'll leave it as tilt as of now. And the main reason why is because of where the population lives in Pennsylvania. So in Pennsylvania, this is a very hard state for Donald Trump to win. We recently just saw an election in Pennsylvania as well. And I think obviously Trump was not on the ballot. Like, it would have been a lot more narrow with Trump's rural turnout machine he's able to achieve. But as we saw, Democrats won another statewide election in Pennsylvania. And the reason they were able to do that was because of Philadelphia suburbs. So, Democrats net a lot of votes in the Philadelphia suburbs. And, that is able to help them. And, I think Biden will do a little bit better there as well. The same way you've seen Democrats continuously do. Hillary Clinton was able to shift these suburbs in her favor. I don't realistically see anything different from Joe Biden. So with that, I think that Joe Biden will continue to make gains in the Philadelphia suburbs. I could see him struggling with black turnout in Philadelphia and, maybe some inner city turnout in Pittsburgh. But I don't realistically think it would be enough. Like, I think Joe Biden, he would need a massive drop off in Philadelphia to win. Like, Trump would need a massive drop off with turnout in Philadelphia. He might get a drop off, but I would say he needs 100,000 less voters. Like, let's say that if there's 100,000 vote drop off in Philadelphia, now we're talking. But that's a huge drop off. Like, Trump, he will do better in these rural areas, but him being able to do better in these rural areas would just maybe be enough to counteract maybe one or two of the counties in the Philadelphia suburbs. So because of that, because of the Philadelphia suburbs, I realistically don't see Trump having too much of a chance in Pennsylvania, unless black turnout in Philadelphia just absolutely falls to the floor. And, Democrats lose ground in Pittsburgh. I don't realistically see him having too much chance of winning. And as of now, that's not the most likely scenario. There might be drop offs, but there won't be an absolute crater in turnout. And that's the only way for Trump to be able to narrowly win Pennsylvania. So because of that, Biden has a sizable firewall with Michigan, with Pennsylvania, with Arizona, and Nevada. As long as he holds on in those states, he will be reelected president despite losing Georgia and Wisconsin. So again, thank you guys so much for tuning into my channel. Please like, subscribe, and comment down below, and have a nice day, you guys. Goodbye.